Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Trace Gallagher in for Martha McCallum right now on the story. The Biden administration confirming the U.S. will send controversial cluster bombs to Ukraine, a weapon they once called, quoting here, a potential war crime. Each one can release hundreds of smaller bombs over a wide area to hit lots of targets at the very same time. But they can also kill civilians. The White House says it will send weapons less likely to leave unexploded duds on the ground to lower the risk, and adds the move does not bring the U.S. closer to a direct conflict with Russia. Watch.
Very clear from the very beginning of this conflict about two things that have been unwavering. First, the United States is not going to war with Russia in Ukraine. And second, the United States is not providing weapons to Ukraine to attack Russia. We do not encourage or enable attacks on Russian territory from Ukraine.
Let's bring in Brett Velicovich, former U.S. Army Special Operations Intelligence Officer and a Fox News contributor. Brett, great to have you on. I want your thoughts on this. These cluster munitions, once deemed, war crime stuff, and now they're sending them to Ukraine. You agree?
Well, Trace, look, there's no, it's obviously that this is a very controversial weapon, but at the same time, I just returned from Ukraine, and the fact is that the Russian government has been using much more advanced weapons, much more dangerous weapons, and so this pales in comparison to what they're using against civilians out there. And frankly speaking, look, the battlefield right now, it is brutal and it is horrific. Most Americans have no idea the cruelty and devastation and damage that the Russian government has done to civilians who never even asked to be a part of this war. You have Russian soldiers, Wagner mercenaries, that have already used chemical and gas attacks out there. They're talking about now even trying to blow up Europe's largest nuclear power plant that they currently have control over. They've fired incendiary rounds from rockets that literally fire over top of these towns, burst into hundreds of pieces, and literally burn everything slowly underneath it without any discrepancies of whether or not it's civilians or soldiers. You've got this counteroffensive now also taking place, and they're finding these abandoned Russian torture chambers where war crimes took place, and where they conducted a number of different crimes against the civilians in these places like that right now. I mean, this is a nation state. This isn't ISIS. We're talking about countries that are governed by the laws of warfare, by Geneva Conventions. And so when I hear about these weapons being controversial, frankly, I see it as a necessity for the Ukrainian people to be able to defend civilians going forward.
But there's also the point that, listen, the problem here is you have Russia firing weapons of maybe war crime weapons into Ukraine. Ukraine is firing the same weapons in Ukraine. So it's, they're invariably going to entangle their own people in this at some point.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Look, I think the biggest thing is that the U.S. government needs to provide the Ukrainians with sort of the left and right limits of using this. I mean, there's a reason why HIMARS are not blowing up inside, across the border in Russia. So if they can provide those left and right limits, the Ukrainians are going to listen to them. They don't want to lose that support from Western nations. And so as long as they do that and they can limit, any destruction of civilians, I think that it's a good idea to send these out.
I want to get this. I want to put this video up here, Brett, because I want your take on this. This is from yesterday. We got this, the Russian fighter jets in Syria kind of going after those U.S. drones and taunting them. I'm wondering what you think of this, because it's become a months-long pattern where Russia continues to use their fighter jets to taunt the United States.
Yeah, and it's going to continue that way, frankly. There's a lot of different battles taking place around the world, and the Russians and U.S. come close together in certain situations like this. We've seen a similar scenario that took place, on the sea that's to the south of Ukraine, and I think that's just going to continue as long as U.S. drones are flying over there and looking at, some of these targets and providing intelligence information to the Ukrainian government. The Russians, are just going to continue to harass these U.S. drones that are up there, and very frankly easy to see. It's not difficult to see these things flying around over there. What I hope doesn't happen is that we get into this conflict against our countries, and really what we should be doing is focusing on creating a sinkhole of Russian modern technology inside Ukraine. I mean, that's where all this money should be spent, so that they don't use their weapons against us in future battles. And that's I think the intent here of the Biden administration.
It's a fair assessment. Brett Velicovich, great to have you on as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.